My top 3 post-spawn baits. So post-spawn fishing. I know I kind of haven't really talked about, I didn't really talk about pre-spawn or spawn, but the post-spawn, my fish are actually around spawn right now. We had a little cold front move in, it's been raining, and so I haven't really been out, I don't know what the fish are doing. But a lot of people are in post-spawn, and what this is it's after the bass are done spawning. So basically, in the spring, quick rundown, pre-spawn, the fish are moving up, getting ready to spawn. They're cruising around the bank, they're looking for places to spawn, usually the males are up shallow. And then spawn is when they're actually up there spawning, and then post-spawn is when they are done spawning. So what happens is, you have the male and the female on the bed, they will do the business, the female will lay her eggs, and then the female will move out usually to a little bit deeper water. Now, usually, it's around the spawning flat, right? So you got these spawning flats where the fish are spawning. Usually it's just the next piece of cover, or the next deep, the deep ledge or whatever, the deepest water closest to that little spawning area or spawning flat. So for instance, I'll have, like when I caught that fish on the bed the other day, as actually a couple last week, maybe one of my other videos. There's this little, it's basically just a shallow bank with lily pads, little open spot in the lily pads, a little cut in the bank, and they're spawning right there. What will happen now is those fish will spawn, and then that female is going to drop out, and the male usually stays shallow. Usually you see a bunch when they're post-spawn, you'll see empty beds, and you may see a couple males sitting on beds. And what the males are doing is it's guarding the bed, and usually he guards it, and then the eggs will hatch, and he'll guard the fry for a little bit, and then eventually he'll leave. But a lot of times, the females, they're gonna drop back, and a lot of people, they're up shallow bed fishing, and then they go, the next day they go out and they're like, well, what happened to all the females? They go out and they can't find any more of the females up on the bed, so they're going, what's going on? Where'd they go? And what happens is they need to recover from the spawn. During the spawn, they don't eat, right? So after they spawn, before they spawn, they're big, they're fed up, they're fat because they're filled with their eggs. But then they use so much energy during the spawn, and then they lay all their eggs, that they're skinny. If you ever call a post-spawn fish, right after it's done spawning, it's a super skinny fish. They got big heads, skinny bellies. And so what those females do is they drop back, and they're recovering from the spawn, and they are starving. They're looking for something to eat, something to get in their belly after that spawn. And so usually they will drop back, like I said, just off the deeper water, or a piece of cover. So for instance, in those lily pads, usually what will happen is she'll drop off onto the edge of those lily pads, right? She spawned up in about 2 feet of water and a little open spot. She'll drop down into the edge of those lily pads, which is 4 or 5 feet of water. So it's deeper, and there's some cover there. You still got those pads to cover. Or like a brush pile, right? If you have a little spawning area and a brush pile close by, they'll kind of move off into that. They're still going to be close. They're not going to just completely abandon and go clean across the lake. They're still going to be close to that spawning area. They're just going to be pulled off a little bit, usually in deeper water or in heavier cover. And they're looking for stuff to eat. They don't want to spend a lot of energy looking for something to eat, right? Because they are starving. But they want something to eat. And so I'm going to show you 3 baits that I like to use. And there's multiple baits you can use. I could have grabbed a lot of stuff out of my tackle box, but I just chose 3 of them, 3 of my favorites. So 3 things to fish in the post-spawn. Number 1 is going to be a jig. This is a 1/2 ounce jig. And jigs, they're a great bait because they're a big profile. You can throw a trailer on there, and you can make it, pretty big trailer if you want. But they're a big profile. So that fish that's starving, has a real skinny belly, looking for something to eat. It's a big profile, it's a big meal, and it's weedless. The jigs, they got the weed guard on them, so they're weedless. So you can throw this in the cover. So say she spawned, and she dropped out to the edge of those lily pads. Now I can go flip this jig around those the edges of those pads to see. or like trees, right? Say you've got like around here we don't, but like cypress trees pushed up. You've got a bunch of them in the shallow they spawn, and then they move out to the edge of those trees, and flipping a jig around could be great, or like that brush pile, or a ledge, whatever you got, whatever those fish, you got to really just find out what they move to, what they drop back to, and then depending on what it is, like I said, lily pads, a brush pile, trees, bushes, you can go flip with this jig. That jig is a great way to catch those post-spawn fish. Now, post-spawn fish, I'm not saying summer fish. Post-spawn and just full-on summer is different. Post-spawn, they're still kind of associated to the spawn. Like I said, they aren't going to just go clean across the lake. The males are still up shallow, and those fish are looking to feed up. Now, what summer is after everything's done. The spawn's completely over. The eggs have hatched. The male has stopped guarding. And those fish just go. The females usually by then have something in their stomach, so usually they're not just little skinny things. Usually they get more healthy, and they may not be fat, but they're going to be a lot more healthier. And then they'll go off in their summer patterns. But before that, when they're still skinny, that's what I like to do. And of course, you could use that in the summer as well. But just to clarify, I'm not talking about summer. I'm talking about right after they're done spawning. Usually within a couple days to a week or so after they're done spawning. But usually it only lasts a few days, about a week maybe around here. But a jig. Jig's a great way to do because they're looking for that bigger meal to fill them up. Another one is going to be my top two. And these aren't in any specific order. If they were, my favorite to fish would probably be the frog, which is what next. The frog. And a frog, again, great if they're around vegetation. If they're in the lily pads, like I said, they just drop to the edges, or they're in hydrilla or some kind of grass, milfoil, you name it. A frog is excellent choice for that. Because these fish, like I said, they're starving, and a frog is a big meal. A frog has got a lot of protein, it's a big meal, especially if you use a bigger frog as well. Different brands like this one here. That's River to Sea Boliwa. And they're wide frogs. They're pretty thick, big profiles. They're not, giant compared to other frogs, but they're a thick profile. If I grab something like a Booyah Pad Crasher, okay, look how thin, flip those around, look how thin that is compared to it, right? It's just a little thin, skinny shape. Compared to this big fat frog. So I like to use the bigger frogs a lot, these big fat ones, and they really appeal to the fish better. It's a bigger meal for that big fish. And it sees that, it's sitting. This doesn't necessarily work if they are deep, but if they drop off into that vegetation, they move off into thicker cover, thicker lily pads. Of course, I talk a lot about lily pads because that's what I fish here. So thicker lily pads. Throw that over the top and work it slow. Don't be trying to work it fast. In the summertime, in a full-on summer, you can work it fast. You can do whatever. But in the post-spawn, they aren't necessarily they're not going to chase, right? They're starving, but those big females don't really want to have to go chase something because they don't have the energy. And that's why a jig works so great. You flip a jig and it falls in front of its face and it's going to suck it in. So if you have this frog, don't be skipping it across the water. But you can get it, kind of walking, kind of twitching above her head, and she'll come up and eat that. And great, so it's a great choice, that hollow body frog. Then for my third one, and this is a great one, this is a great one for, pre-spawn. You could use it on a bedding fish. You could, but post-spawn is what we're talking about. So post-spawn. And it's going to be a big swim bait. And like I said, if you guys have been watching my channel, I just did an unboxing on these swim baits. I'm looking to get more into swim bait fishing. And so, some kind of swim bait. This in here, River to Sea S Waver. It's got a real nice tight S swim through the water. And what it's going to do, you got the female, and she's sitting there, and you just kind of slowly, glide this bait right in front of her, and it's a big meal that she's going to come out and eat. And this is one of the times of years where you can use those bigger fish, or these bigger swim baits. I'll talk about swim baits in a different video, probably on Friday's video. This will be Monday's. Probably on Friday I'll probably talk about more swim bait stuff. But anyway, it's a way to get those big fish, that have the empty stomachs. It's a way to draw them because they want to fill their bellies, right? So again, find those places. Now the other two are more associated to cover. This one here, I'm gonna say, not that vegetation, not the lily pads, but those maybe little ledges. As long as they're not too deep. This doesn't really. I mean, you can really throw different swim baits. You don't have to throw an S-Raver or glide bait. Just a bigger swim bait. But with this one here in particular, it doesn't really dive that deep. Doesn't really go super deep. So you're not going to really be targeting the fish that are dropping off into deeper water, super deep. But this one's a great one to fish around docks. Docks are a great place. Fish will spawn around the docks, up along dock posts and whatnot. And then that female will pull off to the end of the docks. And you can just throw this along the dock and just run it right along the side of that dock, and she'll come out and hammer it. That's one thing I almost forgot to talk about is docks. Docks can be huge. You could also throw the frog and the jig, skip them up under the docks. But docks are huge things because a lot of times in lakes especially in lakes where you have a softer bottom, the fish don't necessarily, they want to spawn on something hard. And they don't necessarily always spawn on the bottom. They will actually spawn on, dock posts, on stumps, on, you name it. And so they will get up under the docks and actually spawn on these dock posts. You actually see them up on their side sometimes, actually spawning like on the dock post. They spawn on all crazy stuff, but and so those docks, they get up in the shallower part, spawn on the dock post, and then that female will drop out to the end of the dock. The docks I have, up shallow, I can cast up to 6 inches, the foot of water, at the very top of the dock, right, close to the bank. And some of those docks will go all the way out to, 10 feet of water or so. And, in some like reservoirs and stuff, you could go even deeper. But and that fish will drop out and she'll just suspend underneath that dock. And you have that, bring a swim bait like that S-Waver by, or some kind of glide bait, and she'll come out and grab it. Now these fish, they're not going to be your PBs, right? They're not going to, usually post-spawn fish, they're not going to be those giant fish, it's going to break a PB, maybe, but they're going to be spawned, they're spawned out, they're going to be skinny. You may catch one here that, during the spawn, she was 10 pounds, now she may only be, 7 pounds. She may have lost a couple pounds during that spawn and, having an empty stomach. So you're not necessarily looking, this isn't the time you want to target a PB. Like I said, I'll talk about swim baits and when to, all that in a different video. But this is more just getting these post-spawn fish. Not necessarily getting a giant. Although, these swim baits like this, and this isn't a huge swim bait by any means, this is, what is this one? Like 6.5. 6 3/4. So it's not a giant, it's not an 8, a 10, a 12-inch, swim bait, not the big ones. But it's still going to draw fish. So you still can catch big fish on them. And you catch what normally would have been a 10-pounder, but instead it's 7. Now that, for me, like a 7-pounder would break my PB. And so it's still a good fish. So, but just keep in mind that even though you're throwing that giant fish, you're not looking for a big fish with a fat belly. These fish are going to have a big head and a skinny little belly on them. And they're just trying to get something in their stomach. So hopefully you enjoyed. Hopefully you guys understand what I'm trying to say. But get out and fish. Get out and maybe if you haven't, you're having trouble catching fish, or you haven't tried any of these baits for post-spawn, especially the swim bait. A jig and a frog everyone throws, but get out there, throw it around, and see what you think. Maybe you catch a couple fish on them. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.